welcome to the podcast, guys. In this podcast, today we're going to discuss what do you need? Is there anything in the entertainment industry that might be able to help me in my startup or business journey? And I think there's a lot of shows out there that can help you, like Shark Tank or The Apprentice, if you want to believe it. But I'm today going to talk about something that is related to the psychological game. I'm going to talk about one TV show, one entertainment industry show that has really impacted me as a business person. And that show today I'd like to discuss is Survivor. Now today you might think I have lost my mind. Okay, why does he think we need Survivor? We need to watch Survivor. But you really look at it. The theme of Survivor is outwit, outlast, and outplay. The thing about outwitting, outlasting, and outplaying goes well to investment industry and the startup industry. Think about this. You've thought of an idea. The next day you start the idea. Next year, you're going to have 10 to 15 customers that are willing to invest on you or willing to buy your product. But when you have a customer, what you create is a chance for a competitor. When you have a competitor, what it creates is this need for a bigger market. When you have a bigger market, what are the three things that you need to remember? You need to outwit everybody, you need to outlast everybody, and you need to outplay everybody. And in the startup industry, when you need to survive, Survivor is the best show to watch. Now let me give you the facts. In Survivor, you have 20 players that are going to enter an island, and you need to vote them out one by one. And then you survive at the end. And then when you are at the end, you either have 2 or 3 people that are going to plead the case to the same people you're going to vote out. Now the thing about it is, you are not going to win depending on just how better the challenges that you've done or how much money or how many advantages you've gotten. The idea is you have to convince these people that you have voted out or backstab to come and vote you in so that you can win the prize. Sometimes it feels like you're trying to convince the same customers who are disgruntled or sometimes think you are not worth it to come by and bring and buy your own product. Now that feels a lot like the startup industry to me, because in the startup industry, when you start off, there's not a lot of good things going on and the product isn't in its final form. It's not like you have the best idea in the world and you've never refined it. You refine along the process, and that's why your idea might not be the best. But then you need to smooth the edges. You need to find the best sweet spot for your product. And when you have the same customers that bought your product on day one, are they gonna think of you as the best product out there when your competitors have the edge of your knowledge imparted on them? No. You have to fight them, you have to outlast them. And that's the point where you bring that same customer back in at day 51, at day 101, at day 180, at year 5, and you have to get them engaged in your product. And that's the point where you have to learn from Survivor. Now, the show in itself is an outdated notion. It has been running for 20 years. But when it started, it never knew it was going to have that much of an impact into a mind of a 25-year-old individual from Nepal. Back when it started, I was only 5 years old. But right now, when I look at the series as a whole and have watched every season of the show, I have learned a lot many things about startup industry and about doing business and about trusting people. Sometimes people in their nature are dubious. Sometimes people in their nature do not do the best thing for themselves and they pay for it. And all those lessons I've learned through the lives of so many people that I've watched play the game, I've learned the most important valuable lesson, that people are the most important key in investment. You never invest in an idea. You invest in people. You have the idea that you have to invest in the trust you build up in these people. the trust that is then imparted into the product, then into the company, and then into the psyche of the customer. Now this trust has this idea of trickle-down economics. More trust you impart into the individual that is founding this product, more trust they impart into the idea. And the more trust the idea gets into itself, more trust the customer puts into the idea. And then it becomes this ideal product. It doesn't start out that way, but it starts with the idea of trust. And trust goes both ways. You have to trust the individual that's investing on you. As a startup founder, you have to think about those people are putting their life savings on you. And you must always remember, these are the same people who are always at odds and never investing on you. So when they've made that crucial decision of investing on you, you have to think about how much trust they put on you as a person. Then you have to put the same amount of trust in the idea. If you don't believe the idea works for you, then you have to roll back and go back to the drawing board. Never break a trust of a person, but then sometimes the idea of business is breaking trust, because you never know how the market is going to react. Sometimes you think the idea in itself is a killer, but then situations like the coronavirus, or situations of other pandemics or economic crisis might break that trust. But even in those situations, they are the most important people who invested on you. These investors, you have to build relationships. Now the show in itself has these precarious situations where these trust situations, these friendships, these relationships are tested. And in these crisis situations, people have come out on top. Sometimes people are at odds of 7-1, 8-1, 20-1. Sometimes people have won in those situations. How do we understand that? Because of that, you have to build and play against other people. That's when you have to remember, the theme of the game is outplayed. Now, if I was telling you that I had 5 chips in my hand, and I'd say I would give your competitor, imagine there's only one competitor, 3 chips, and I'll give you 2. But then I would say the person who has 2 more chips is the other person or the customer that you would have to convince, and that will decide the game. Now, the person who has 3 chips will try their best to goad them into getting 2.5 chips and divide them among each other between the customers and themselves. But if you convince the customer to give you both of their chips, and in return you give them a basis of trust or a basis of product, that's the point you have to understand. That's what I learned from this game. People have been doing that since the first season of Survivor, when Richard Thatch, a man who had nothing, walked off from that pedestal and still won in that final challenge. That made me realize there's a power in the power of persuasion. See, most of winners of Survivor that I met have won through the power of outwitting other people and outlasting other people. Outplaying comes natural to these people, so I just talked about. But then remember, these folks have trained themselves by the day 39, the final day of tribal, that they've trained themselves. In most cases, these people are new people who played the game of Survivor. They've trained these people in their head not to trust anyone, but also build trust and ask for votes and ask for other people to trust them and make them the winner of Survivor. That's the point when they've outwitted everybody else. Sometimes there are strong people who won all challenges that win. Sometimes there are strategic threats like Yul Kwan that won the game. And you might be thinking, he's taking these names and he's taking these random people's thoughts and then putting us over them, and then we don't know, there's no context. Just Google these people. They've won this game because they have been thinking strategically, and sometimes they've been playing to the highest level, showing their physical prowess. What that tells me is there's a variety of winners out there. There's a variety of people that have won this game, and there's not only one way to win this game, there's multiple ways to win this game. same in the sector of startup. Now, if you are an entrepreneur, sometimes in the sector of startup, you never have the same tools as the other person. Some people might have the best teammates, but the best resources, but they might not have the highest amount of money. The other people in a difficult reverse situation. But then you have to work with the tools you have, not with the tools you don't. Sometimes you can leverage the tools you don't have. Bluffs work in Survivor as much as they work in the sector of startup. So how do we leverage these? So you need to first understand who you are and who you aren't, and then play off both sides of your personality based on who you are and who you aren't, and grow from that situation. Survivor is about growing, and so is the startup sector. Now, unlike Survivor, you don't have Jeb Pro saying you're gonna win $1 million at the end. Nothing is sure. But same in the game of life and startup, there's nothing sure about Survivor. Some people who thought they're gonna win at the end have lost at the end by taking a weaker player, because they thought they could outwit, outlast, but sometimes they got outwitted. So never lose hope. Never think you're at the top, because the carpet underneath your feet might be taken over and you might be out of the game. But sometimes life gives you second chances. There are idols at play. There are advantages. So these things you have to always keep in check. Sometimes a crisis might help you out. Sometimes a people or a person that you've trusted might betray you. All these situations are similar to the game of Survivor as much as they are similar to the game of startup. Now think of startup as the game. Startup industry is a game to you if you really look at it. Nothing really bad happens. Nothing really worse happens if you lose the game, but you might lose the trust of an individual. Have you lost a friend? If you've lost an investor, if you lost somebody who invested on you, if you lost their trust, have you lost them forever? You have to think about all these risks and go forward. Now, when you talk about risk, the biggest risk in life is losing your head and losing your cool. It's similar to the startup and similar to the game of Survivor. Most folks don't understand that. Even in the game of Survivor, they don't understand the fact that there's a lot of folks out there that don't know how to play this game. And they're going to overthink it, they're going to over-dramatize their situation, and that's what gets them at the end, you know? They're not going to outlast, outwit, and outsurvive in this situation. Now, the most important thing about not thinking too much is not comparing the game of Survivor and startup in the same situation. Yes, you can learn about the whole show, you can learn about the game, but sometimes you gotta let your body flow and then you gotta adapt to your situation, okay? So it's not always sure that you're gonna win. You're never sure that the customer is going to react the same way, but sometimes you have to iterate. Just like day 1 is never the same as day 39 in the game of Survivor, it's never same to you since day 1 of your startup to day 5 of your startup, because you're learning. New things are coming up, new customer behaviors are coming up, new investors are coming up, and never lock you down. Your alliances that you make with your investors until it's written in pen and paper, just like until it's written in the voting booth and the voting paper in Survivor, it's never written down. So don't put all your eggs in one basket. That's the most important lesson that I've learned through the game of Survivor. Now, putting your eggs in all one basket, that means you put trust in only one person. You know what that does to you? That creates a narrow tunnel vision. You cannot co-work with other people. There are people who paid through that price. And sometimes they might be your strongest ally, but sometimes they might be too toxic for you. Sometimes an investor might just see the short vision. Now, how do you cut ties with that person? My idea is think about the game of Survivor. Just like when they want to win the game, they have to please the people they voted out or they don't like to vote them in. What they do is they convince them that they're the best people in the world, and that's how they win the game. That's how you need to think. Even your competitors need to like you. They need to despise your sales number, but they as a person, as an individual, must like you as an individual, because inherently in business, there's nobody who's sane, nobody who's your own, there are no permanent relationships. It's similar to politics. Now, if I define politics, survivor, and startup in the same realm, it's all about human relationships. If you can curate your human relationships based on what you need to know and what you need to understand about your competitors, that's when you won the game. You're not playing the product, you're not playing the market, you're playing the people. When you're playing the people, you're always trying to win through people's aid. Always remember, you never win alone. You always win together. It's clear in the game of Survivor. It's clear at the game of Startup. But the core difference between Survivor and your game of Startup is the one most important thing that you need to understand. In the game of Survivor, there might be only one winner. In the game of Startup, there can be multiple winners. Think about your investor, think about you, think about your customer, the whole world in general, all your employees. They're all winners. If your product wins, they all win. So you need to form those allies. You, your idea, your whole personality, and all the love, care, and trust you put in your product is the culmination of what you need to do to win this game, okay? And I need to think and I need to understand that's your perspective in human emotion when you're putting it into the startup industry. Now I've talked and said a lot about startup, but essentially it's just a business, people. You need to make those human relationships. You need to understand that these are the most important aspect of your personality that you need to put into. Now I like to end this podcast with saying just the most important thing. Don't think of it as a game. Don't think of it as too much of a big thing. Just think of it as the most human relationship you ever built through an intangible, incorrigible thing. That's when you won the game, okay? That's my comparison between Survivor and the game of Startup. Now, if you understand, if you like, share, all these things to my podcast, I love it. But if you think, no, this was far-fetched, tell me why I was wrong, give me reasons. And if you're a fan of Survivor, I hope Tony Vlachos wins this Survivor Season 40. Thank you.